Please comment where you are watching in the world. Please become a channel member to support us. Let me set the scene for you. It's a chilly Friday night in Chicago, and I'm about to meet this guy, Jared, who I matched with on the joyous Bumble. He seemed normal and not crazy, or at least as normal as you can expect on a dating app. His profile stated that he was an amateur magician, and I thought, okay, quirky but sort of cool. I figured he'd be one of those guys who can do a card trick or maybe pull a quarter out of your ear at a party. You know, harmless fun. We decided to meet at this little pizza place in Lincoln Park. One of those cozy, dimly lit spots where you can order a deep dish and a craft beer and pretend you're not freezing your butt off in the middle of February. I got there first, mostly because I hate being late, and settled into a booth by the window. Jared walked in a few minutes later, wearing a slightly wrinkled button-up shirt and carrying what looked like a deck of cards in his hand. "Hey Sophie," he said, sliding into the booth with a big grin. "Ready to be amazed?" Now, I thought he was joking. Like, maybe he was just making a quirky little magician joke to break the ice. So I laughed and said, "Sure. Amaze me." Before I could even ask him how his day was, Jared whipped out the deck of cards and started shuffling them like he was auditioning for America's Got Talent. I'm not talking about your average shuffle, either. I'm talking about fancy flourishes, cards flying from one hand to the other, the whole 9 yards. "Pick a card," he said, fanning the deck out in front of me. I hesitated for a second. I mean, we hadn't even ordered drinks yet. But I didn't want to be rude, so I picked a card, the Queen of Hearts. Jared told me to put it back in the deck, and then shuffled again, this time with even more dramatic flair. "Is this your card?" he asked, holding up the 3 of spades. "Nope," I said, trying not to laugh. Jared frowned, muttered something under his breath, and shuffled again. "Okay, this time for sure," he said. He pulled out another card, the 7 of diamonds. "Still no," I said. At this point, I was starting to wonder if he was even a magician at all, or if he just bought a deck of cards at Walgreens on his way to the restaurant. He kept trying, though, pulling out card after card, none of which were the Queen of Hearts. Finally, he gave up and said, "Well, sometimes the magic is in the attempt." What does that even mean? I thought. We finally ordered food, and for a few minutes, the conversation was normal. He told me about his job, something vague about being in tech sales, and I told him about mine. But then, right as I was about to ask him if he had any hobbies besides magic, he interrupted me and said, "Wait, I have something better than cards." "Oh no." Jared reached into his pocket and pulled out a quarter. "Watch this," he said, holding it up between his thumb and forefinger. He started moving it around, making it look like it was disappearing and reappearing between his fingers. It was kind of impressive, I'll admit, but he kept going, and going, and going. "Tada," he said, finally pulling the quarter out of my ear. I clapped politely, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. "Wow, that was cool," I said. "You're a great audience," Jared replied, winking at me. By the time the pizza arrived, I was seriously questioning all of my life choices that had led me to this moment. But the food was good, deep dish, gooey cheese, the works, so I figured I'd stick it out. Then the check came. Jared reached into his pocket, and I swear to God, I knew what was coming before he even said it. "Oh no," he said, patting his pockets dramatically. "I forgot my wallet." I stared at him, waiting for him to say he was kidding. He wasn't. "Don't worry," he said, grinning like he'd just thought of the most brilliant idea in the world. "I'll make it disappear." I laughed awkwardly, thinking he was about to pull some kind of magic trick to pay the bill. But no. Jared just sat there, looking at me expectantly. "So, do you want me to cover it?" I asked because apparently I'm too polite for my own good. "Would you mind?" he said, leaning back in the booth like he didn't have a care in the world. "I'll get it next time." Next time? Oh, honey, there was not going to be a next time. I paid the bill, mostly because I just wanted to get out of there, and Jared had the nerve to say, "You're amazing, Sophie. Like the real MVP. I owe you big time." As we walked out of the restaurant, he turned to me and said, "So, what did you think of the magic?" "It was something," I replied, trying to be diplomatic. Jared grinned. "I knew you'd love it. You've got great energy. Let me know when you want to see my disappearing scarf trick." I smiled and nodded, but as soon as I got home, I unmatched him on Bumble and vowed never to date another magician again. The moral of the story? If a guy says he's an amateur magician, just assume he's also an amateur at paying for dinner. It all began when I swiped right on a guy's profile who was known as Logan, a guy whose Tinder profile screamed life of the party. He had pictures of himself on stage holding a microphone, a bio that said, "Professional shower singer, amateur rock star," and a tagline that read, "Let's duet." Intriguing, I thought. After a few days of backwards and forwards messaging, Logan suggested we meet up at this karaoke bar downtown. Nashville is crawling with karaoke joints, and I figured it was a safe enough bet for a first date. I mean, it's public, there's music, and if things got awkward, I could always pretend I needed to leave early to feed my non-existent cat. I put on a cute but casual outfit, jeans, booties, and a leather jacket, and showed up at the bar right on time. Logan was already there, sipping a beer and chatting with the bartender like they were old friends. He waved me over, grinning from ear to ear. "Hey, you made it," he said, pulling me into a hug that lasted just a second too long. The bar was packed, with people laughing, drinking, and singing their hearts out on stage. It had that sticky floor, neon sign charm that only a dive bar can pull off. I ordered a drink, and we found a small table near the stage. So Logan said, leaning in, "Are you ready to sing?" I laughed nervously. "Oh, I don't really sing. I'm more of a cheer from the audience kind of girl." Logan's eyes widened, like I'd just told him I didn't believe in music. "What? No way. Everyone sings at karaoke. That's the whole point." "Maybe after a drink or two," I said, trying to buy myself some time. Logan nodded, but I could tell he wasn't satisfied with that answer. He pulled out a songbook and started flipping through it with the intensity of someone studying for finals. "What's your vibe?" he asked. "Are you more of a pop diva, a country queen, or like secretly into 80s hair metal?" I don't really have a vibe," I said, laughing. "You pick something." "Big mistake." Logan's face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "Perfect. I've got just the thing." Before I could stop him, he marched up to the DJ and handed over the song request slip. "You're gonna love this," he said when he came back to the table. A few minutes later, the DJ called Logan's name, and he practically sprinted to the stage. The opening notes of Bon Jovi's "Livin' on a Prayer" started playing, and Logan grabbed the mic like he was headlining Madison Square Garden. Now, I'll give him credit, Logan could sing. Kind of. He had that raspy, shouty style that worked for Bon Jovi. But he was taking it so seriously that I couldn't tell if he was trying to be funny or if he genuinely thought he was auditioning for The Voice. Either way, the crowd was loving it. People were clapping, singing along, and waving their drinks in the air. Meanwhile, I was sitting at the table, nursing my drink and trying not to make eye contact with anyone. When Logan finished, he came back to the table, sweating and grinning like he'd just won a Grammy. "That was amazing, right?" he asked, clearly fishing for compliments. "You really went for it," I said, which was technically true. "Thanks," he said, grabbing my hand. "You're up next." "Oh no," I said, shaking my head. "I'm good, really." "Nope," Logan said, pulling me out of my chair. "You can't come to a karaoke bar and not sing. That's like a crime." I tried to resist, but Logan was already dragging me toward the stage. "I picked an easy one for you," he said. "What did you pick?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "You'll see," he said with a wink. The DJ handed me the mic, and I stared at the screen as the opening notes of Britney Spears' "Baby One More Time" started playing. Oh God! I turned to glare at Logan, who was standing off to the side, cheering and giving me 2 big thumbs up. "You've got this," he shouted. I sighed, knowing there was no way out. The crowd was watching, and the words were already appearing on the screen. So I took a deep breath and started singing. Now, I'm no Britney. My voice is passable at best, and I was so nervous that I barely managed to hit the notes. But the crowd didn't seem to care. By the time I got to the chorus, people were singing along, and I even managed to have a little fun with it. When I finished, the crowd applauded, and I handed the mic back to the DJ, ready to slink back to the safety of my table. But Logan had other plans. "See? That wasn't so bad," he said, throwing his arm around my shoulders. "It was terrifying," I replied, laughing. "Well, you're a natural," he said. "But we're not done yet." "What do you mean?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. Logan grinned and held up another song request slip. "Duet time." Before I could protest, he handed the slip to the DJ and dragged me back to the stage. The next thing I knew, we were singing "Shallow" from A Star Is Born. You know, the one where Lady Gaga belts her heart out while Bradley Cooper growls in the background. Yeah, that one. Logan went full Bradley Cooper, growling and swaying like he was at a sold-out arena show. I tried my best to channel my inner Lady Gaga, but I was so embarrassed that my voice came out as more of a whisper. Logan didn't seem to notice. He was too busy pointing at random people in the crowd and gesturing dramatically, like he was serenading them. When the song finally ended, I practically bolted off the stage. Logan followed me, laughing and clapping me on the back. "That was incredible," he said. "I think I need another drink," I muttered, heading for the bar. The rest of the night was a blur of Logan hogging the stage, and me trying to avoid being dragged up there again. He sang everything from Journey to Queen to a truly baffling rendition of Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus. By the time the night was over, I was exhausted and more than ready to go home. As we walked out of the bar, Logan turned to me and said, "So, when's our next duet?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. I mumbled something about being really busy with work and got into my Uber as quickly as possible. As soon as I got home, I unmatched him on Tinder and swore off karaoke bars for the foreseeable future. So I matched with this guy, Ryan, on Hinge. His profile was full of gym selfies, which normally isn't my thing or a good sign for me, but his prompts were sort of funny. He had one that said, "The way to my heart is through protein shakes and Nietzsche." I figured maybe he was one of those gym bros who had a deep, intellectual side. Plus, his pictures weren't bad, biceps for days. What's the worst could happen? We started chatting, and Ryan was charming enough. He asked me about my favorite books and told me he was super into philosophy and always looking for new ways to challenge his mind. He suggested we meet up for coffee and a walk along the Hoboken waterfront. It sounded nice, low pressure, good views of Manhattan, and a solid excuse to wear my new boots. I got there a little early and grabbed a table at this cute cafe near the pier. Ryan showed up right on time, wearing a tight black Henley that looked like it was specifically designed to show off his pecs. He gave me a big smile and said, "Hey, you must be Jess." "Yep, that's me," I said, trying not to stare at his arms. He ordered a black coffee, of course, and we started chatting. At first, it was fine. He told me he worked in sales for a tech company, but spent most of his free time lifting, reading, and reflecting. I asked him what kind of books he liked, thinking maybe we could bond over something. "Mostly philosophy," he said, leaning back in his chair like he was about to drop some wisdom on me. "Nietzsche, Camus, Kierkegaard. You know, the greats." "That's cool," I said, nodding politely. "I read The Stranger in college. It was interesting." Ryan's eyes lit up. "Ah, Camus, a fellow existentialist." I wouldn't call myself an existentialist, but I didn't correct him. Instead, I asked him what he liked most about philosophy. "It's all about finding meaning in a meaningless world," he said, staring into the distance like he was in a movie montage. Like Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." "That's deep," I replied, taking a sip of my latte. Ryan nodded, clearly pleased with himself. "Exactly. And that's why I lift." "Wait, what? Because of Nietzsche?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Totally," he said, leaning forward like he was about to let me in on some big secret. "When you're lifting, it's just you against the weights. It's the ultimate confrontation with the absurd. You have to create your own purpose, your own why." I didn't know what to say. I mean, I've been to the gym before, but I've never thought of it as a battle with the meaning of life. Ryan kept going. "Like, when I'm deadlifting, I think about how Sisyphus had to push that boulder up the hill over and over again. It's the same thing, you know? You're never really done. There's always more weight to lift, more reps to do. That's life." "Right," I said, trying not to laugh. At this point, I was starting to wonder if Ryan spent more time reading philosophy books than actually talking to people. But I figured, hey, maybe he's just nervous. Let's give him a chance. After we finished our coffee, we started walking along the waterfront. It was a beautiful day, clear skies, the Manhattan skyline sparkling across the Hudson, and I was hoping we could steer the conversation towards something a little more normal. "So," I said, "do you have any hobbies besides the gym and reading?" "I'm really into meditation," he said. "It helps me align my mind and body." "You ever try it?" "Yeah, a little," I said. "I'm not very good at sitting still, though." Ryan smiled like he'd just caught me in a teachable moment. "That's because you're resisting the present moment," he said. "You have to surrender to the now. Like Eckhart Tolle says, realize deeply that the present moment is all you ever have." I nodded, trying to seem interested. "That's a good quote." "It is," Ryan said, stopping to look out at the water. "You know, sometimes I come out here to reflect on the vastness of existence. Like, look at that skyline. It's incredible, but it's also insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe." "Totally," I said, wondering how much longer this date was going to last. Ryan turned to me, his expression serious. "What about you, Jess? What's your why?" "My what?" Your why, he said, gesturing dramatically. Your reason for being. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Coffee. I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Ryan didn't laugh. No, seriously, he said. What drives you? What gives your life meaning? I stared at him, completely caught off guard. I mean, this was a first date, not a therapy session. I don't know, I said finally. I guess I just try to enjoy the little things, you know? Like spending time with friends, trying new restaurants, stuff like that. Ryan nodded thoughtfully, like I'd just said something profound. That's valid, he said. But have you ever thought about your legacy? Like, what you want to leave behind when you're gone? I think I'm just trying to get through the week, I said, laughing awkwardly. Ryan smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I get that, he said. But you should really take some time to think about it. Life is short, you know? You don't want to waste it on meaningless pursuits. At this point, I was seriously regretting swiping right. I mean, don't get me wrong. I appreciate a guy with depth. But there's a difference between being introspective and turning every conversation into a TED Talk. We walked back to the cafe, and Ryan offered to walk me to my car. I had a great time today, he said as we reached the parking lot. You've got a really good energy. Thanks, I said, trying to sound polite. Ryan hesitated for a moment, then said, Before you go, I just want to leave you with one thought. Oh, okay, I said, bracing myself. He looked me straight in the eye and said, Become who you are. What? It's Nietzsche, he said, smiling like he'd just dropped the mic. Think about it. I nodded slowly, got in my car, and drove off as fast as I could. I'll admit it. I was feeling optimistic when I swiped right on Bryce. His Tinder profile had a certain charm to it. He described himself as a seeker of truth, in tune with the vibrations of the universe. I figured he was probably one of those meditation types who does yoga on the beach at sunrise. Not really my thing, but hey, he was good looking and cute. Those pictures of him hiking in the Blue Ridge Mountains? Chef's kiss. Plus, the man had a dog in one photo, a golden retriever with a bandana. Instant bonus points for me. We decided to meet at Forsyth Park. Classic Savannah spot, right? The fountain, the Spanish moss hanging from the oak trees, the whole romantic vibe. I thought, this is potential. I put on my best sundress, did my hair all nice, and even threw on some heels I hadn't worn in years. I was feeling good. When I arrived, Bryce was already there, standing by the fountain. He was dressed in this loose-fitting linen shirt and some kind of hemp necklace. His hair was tied back in a man bun, and I swear I could smell patchouli before I even got within 10 feet of him. Okay, fine, I thought. Maybe he's just really into natural products. Delilah, he said as soon as I walked up, like he was greeting a long-lost friend. He grabbed my hands, both of them, and just held them there for a moment, staring into my eyes. You have a beautiful energy, he said. Now, I'm a polite Southern girl, so I smiled and said, Well, thank you. That's sweet. But in my mind, I was already thinking, okay, this is a little intense. We started walking through the park, making small talk. He asked me about my job, my family, the usual stuff. For the first 10 minutes, he seemed pretty normal. But then, out of nowhere, he stopped dead in his tracks, turned to me, and said, I need to tell you something important. I froze. My first thought was, oh God, he's married. Or he's about to ask me for money. I'm a psychic, he said, his voice low and serious, like he was confessing to being in the CIA or something. I blinked. A psychic? Like you read palms and stuff? No, he said, waving his hand dismissively. That's amateur stuff. I read auras. I see energies. I can perceive the future. Now listen, I've lived in Savannah my whole life. This is a town that thrives on ghost tours and haunted history, so I'm no stranger to people with unconventional hobbies. But this was new. Still, I didn't want to be rude, so I just said, Oh, that's cool. Bryce nodded, like he'd just revealed some great cosmic truth. Your aura, he said, squinting at me, is lavender. Soft, but with streaks of gold. I had no idea what that meant, so I just said, Thanks. He smiled like he'd just told me I won the lottery. It's rare. Very rare. At this point, I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable. People were walking by, glancing at us, probably wondering why this man was squinting at me like he was trying to decode a Magic Eye poster. I tried to steer the conversation back to something normal. So, what do you do for work? I'm a spiritual guide, he said. But that's not important right now. What's important is what I'm about to tell you. I braced myself. You're going to meet your soulmate in 5 weeks, he said. I blinked again. What? 5 weeks, he repeated. holding up 5 fingers like I didn't understand the concept of time. That's when you'll meet him. Your true love. I laughed nervously. Well, that's good to know, I guess. But Bryce wasn't done. It's not me, he said solemnly. Y'all, I didn't know what to say. I mean, who tells someone on a first date that they're not their soulmate? Isn't the whole point of dating to see if you might be soulmates? I tried to make a joke out of it. Well, I guess that means we're just killing time here, huh? He didn't laugh. He just nodded like, exactly. The date went downhill from there. Bryce insisted on giving me a deeper reading. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and started waving his hands around my head like he was conducting an invisible orchestra. People walking by were staring, and I was mortified. I see water, he said, his eyes still closed. You're surrounded by water. Well, we're in Savannah, I said. There's water everywhere. No, he said, shaking his head. This is specific. A river. That's where you'll meet him, your soulmate. Okay, I said, just trying to humor him at this point. He opened his eyes and looked at me dead serious. Mark your calendar. 5 weeks. The river. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I mean, what do you even say to that? I tried to change the subject again, asking him about his hobbies or his favorite movies, but he kept steering the conversation back to my supposed future. I can sense that you're skeptical, he said at one point. But don't worry. The universe always reveals itself in time. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I made up some excuse about having an early meeting the next day and said I needed to go. Bryce didn't seem the least bit offended. In fact, he smiled and said, "Thank you for allowing me to share my gift with you." Then, as I was about to walk away, he pulled out his phone and said, "Normally I charge $50 for a reading, but since this was a date, I'll give you a discount. $20. Y'all, I couldn't believe it. This man wanted me to pay him for the privilege of being told that he wasn't my soulmate. I was so stunned, I didn't even argue. I just pulled out my phone and Venmo'd him $20 so I could get the hell out of there. I spent the rest of the evening at Mrs. Wilkes' dining room, treating myself to a plate of shrimp and grits. And you know what? That shrimp and grits. That was my soulmate, right there. 5 weeks later, I didn't meet anyone by the river. But I did meet a guy at a trivia night who didn't read my aura or charge me for the pleasure of his company. So, maybe the universe did reveal itself in time. Just not in the way Bryce thought. When I matched with Cody on Hinge, I thought I'd finally found someone normal. His profile was full of classic Idaho guy stuff, fishing, hiking, Netflix, and a picture of him holding a trout that was almost as big as he was. I had assumed he'd be the kind of guy who'd take me to a brewery or suggest a hike in the Boise foothills. Instead, Cody suggested a petting zoo. Yep, a bloody petting zoo. Now, I'm not one to turn down a unique first date idea. I thought, okay, that's a cute idea, quirky, I can roll with this. Plus, I hadn't been to a petting zoo since I was like 8. It could be fun, right? So, I put on my best casual but cute outfit, jeans, ankle boots, and a flannel, because this is Idaho after all, and met him at the petting zoo just outside Zoo Boise. When I got there, Cody was already waiting by the entrance with a big grin on his face and a bag of animal feed in his hands. He was wearing a baseball cap and a Carhartt jacket, looking exactly like the kind of guy who probably grew up on a farm. "You're gonna love this," he said as soon as I walked up. "Goats are amazing. Goats. Specifically goats." I should have known right then and there that this wasn't going to be a normal afternoon. We walked into the petting zoo, and at first it was pretty fun. There were bunnies, llamas, and some of those tiny pigs that looked like they could fit in your purse. I was happily feeding a llama when I turned around and saw Cody crouched down next to one of the goats, staring into its eyes like they were having a telepathic conversation. "Did you know goats are the most misunderstood creatures?" he said when he noticed me looking at him. No, I didn't know that," I replied. "They're like nature's philosophers," he said, nodding seriously. "They see the world in ways we can't even comprehend." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. For the next 20 minutes, Cody lectured me about goats. He told me about their intelligence, their social structures, and how they're actually better companions than dogs. "Dogs are loyal, sure," he said, "but goats are independent. They don't just follow you blindly. They choose to love you." At this point, I was starting to get a little concerned. I mean, it's one thing to like animals, but Cody was acting like this goat was his spirit animal or something. And then it got weirder. Cody decided that one of the goats needed a name. "She's special," he said, pointing to this little gray goat with a white stripe down her back. She deserves a name that reflects her beauty and strength. Okay, I said. What name are you thinking? He looked at me with this big, goofy grin and said, Delilah. I'm gonna name her after you. Y'all, this man named a goat after me. On our first date. I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you even do in that situation? I just kind of laughed awkwardly and said, wow, that's flattering. But Cody wasn't done. He started calling the goat over, like it was a dog or something. Delilah, come here, girl. The goat, of course, had no idea what was going on and just stood there chewing on some hay. Cody didn't seem to notice. He was too busy telling me about how he'd always wanted to own a goat farm. You know, he said, a lot of people don't realize how sustainable goats are. You can milk them, they eat pretty much anything, and their poop makes great fertilizer. I mean, what more could you want? I smiled and nodded, trying to be polite, but in my head, I was screaming, abort mission. Abort mission. The final straw came when Cody asked one of the petting zoo employees if they sold goats. I thought he was joking, but he was dead serious. I feel like Delilah and I have a connection, he said, gesturing to the goat. How much would it cost to take her home? The employee, bless her heart, just stared at him for a moment before saying, sir, these goats aren't for sale. Cody looked genuinely disappointed. That's a shame, he said, shaking his head. She would have been perfect. At that point, I decided it was time to call it a day. I told Cody I had to get going, and he looked genuinely sad. Are you sure? He asked. I was thinking we could grab some ice cream and talk more about goat farming. I politely declined, muttering something about having an early morning. As I walked back to my car, I could hear him behind me saying goodbye to the goat. Bye, Delilah, he said. I'll come back for you. I have not been on a date since, let me tell you. F that. I'm not going to lie to you, dating in Jersey is an extreme sport. You think you've seen it all, and then you meet someone who makes you question whether or not you should just give up and adopt a dozen cats. Now enter Chris. Chris and I matched on Bumble. We started talking, and Chris was funny in that sarcastic New Jersey kind of way that I love. He asked me if I was more of a Taylor ham or pork roll person, which, if you're from Jersey, is basically the ultimate compatibility test. For the record, it's Taylor ham. Don't come at me. After a few days of banter, he asked if I wanted to hang out that Friday night. Sure, I said. What were you thinking? There's this party in Jersey City, he said. It's at my friend's place. Super chill. You'll love it. Now, a party isn't usually my go-to for a first date. I prefer something low-key like coffee or drinks. But Chris seemed cool, and I figured why not. Worst case, I'd have an excuse to leave if it got weird. Friday night rolled around, and Chris texted me the address. I put on my casual but cute outfit, jeans, a leather jacket, and ankle boots, and headed out. The address he gave me was in a decent area, not too far from downtown, so I wasn't worried. When I pulled up, I realized the party was at a townhouse. Okay, cool, I thought. Probably just a house party. No big deal. I texted Chris to let him know I was outside, and he replied, come around back. Basement entrance. Basement entrance? Now, I should have been alarmed. I should have turned my car around and gone straight home. But I was already there, and I didn't want to seem rude, so I figured I'd at least check it out. I walked around to the back of the house, where I found a staircase leading down to a basement door. There was no music, no voices, no sign of a party. Just a dim light shining through the tiny basement window. I knocked, and after a few seconds, Chris opened the door. He was wearing a hoodie and jeans, and he looked even cuter in person. Hey, he said, grinning. Come on in. I stepped inside, and that's when I realized there was no party. The basement was, well, a basement. Low ceilings, exposed pipes, a couch that looked like it had been dragged in off the street, and a mini fridge humming in the corner. There wasn't another person in sight. Where's everyone else? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Oh, Chris said, scratching the back of his neck. Yeah, so, the party kind of fell through. It's just us. Just us. I should have left right then and there, but part of me felt bad. Maybe he'd really thought there was going to be a party, and it just didn't happen. Plus, he seemed harmless, and I didn't want to be rude. So I stayed. Okay, I said, sitting down on the couch. What now? Chris opened the mini fridge and pulled out 2 cans of PBR. Beer, he asked, handing me one. Sure, I said, because honestly, I needed something to take the edge off. We sat there for a while, making small talk. Chris told me about his job, his favorite bands, and how he'd just started getting into home brewing. He was nice enough, but the whole situation was just weird. After about 20 minutes, he leaned back and said, "So, do you like video games?" Yeah, I guess," I said. Chris jumped up, grabbed a PlayStation controller, and turned on the TV. "Cool. Let's play Call of Duty." Now, I don't know if you've ever been on a first date where the guy decides to play video games, but let me tell you, it's not exactly romantic. Chris handed me a controller and spent the next hour trying to teach me how to get headshots, while I sat there wondering how my life had come to this. At one point, I tried to steer the conversation back to something normal. "So, what do you usually do on weekends?" I asked. "This," he said, gesturing to the TV. "Cool," I said, forcing a smile. By the time I finished my beer, I was ready to go. "Well, this has been fun," I said, standing up. "But I should probably head out." Chris looked genuinely disappointed. "Oh, already?" "Yeah," I said, grabbing my jacket. "Early morning tomorrow." He walked me to the door and said, "We should do this again sometime." I smiled politely and said, "Yeah, maybe," knowing full well that I would not be doing this again. When I got home, I told my roommate what happened, and she just stared at me in disbelief. "Wait," she said, "you actually went into a random guy's basement?" "Yeah," I said, cringing. "I know. Never again." I should have trusted my gut. That little voice in the back of my head that said, this guy might be a walking red flag. But no, I ignored it. I told myself I was being paranoid because, hey, dating is hard, and you've got to give people a chance, right? So I matched with this guy, Tyler, on an app you may have heard called Plenty of Fish. I know, right? His profile wasn't anything groundbreaking. He worked in construction, liked horror movies, who doesn't? After a few days of messaging, Tyler asked if I wanted to grab a coffee. Perfect, I thought. We agreed to meet at a cute little cafe in downtown Newark. I was actually kind of excited. I hadn't been on a date in a while, and Tyler seemed chill. The day of the date, I got ready with plenty of time to spare. I even put on makeup, which, let me tell you, is not an everyday occurrence for me. I was just about to leave the house when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Tyler. "Hey, change of plans," it read. "Oh, what's up?" I replied, already feeling a tiny pang of unease. "Can we meet somewhere else? There's this cool spot I want to show you." Now, I should have asked more questions. I should have said, "What spot? Why the last-minute change?" But instead, I just went with it. "Sure," I said. "Where?" Tyler sent me the address, and I punched it into Google Maps. It wasn't far, about 15 minutes away, but when I looked at the street view, all I saw was an empty lot and what looked like an old, boarded-up building. "What's there?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "It's this old building I worked on a few years ago," he replied. "It's abandoned now, but it's really cool. I think you'll like it." Y'all, that little voice in my head was practically screaming at this point. "Don't do it. This is weird. This is a bad idea." But then I thought, okay, maybe it's not that weird. Maybe he's just into urban exploration or something. People do that, right? So against my better judgment, I got in my car and started driving. The closer I got, the worse I felt. The area wasn't exactly sketchy, but it wasn't the kind of place you'd go for a romantic stroll either. The streets were quiet, too quiet, and when I finally saw the building, my stomach sank. It was huge, looming over the street like something straight out of a horror movie. The windows were broken, the walls were covered in graffiti, and there were weeds growing through the cracks in the pavement. I pulled over a block away and just sat there, staring at it. My phone buzzed again. "You close?" Tyler asked. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. What the hell was I doing? Meeting a guy I barely knew at an abandoned building? Was I insane? This was how people ended up on the evening news. I typed out a quick reply. "Hey, I don't think this is a good idea. Sorry, but I'm not comfortable meeting here." A minute later, Tyler replied, "Come on, it's fine. I promise you'll love it. It's cool, I swear." "No," I typed back. "This is really weird. I'm gonna head home." I sat there for another minute, half expecting him to blow up my phone with more messages. But instead, all I got was a single reply. "Whatever. Whatever." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just whatever. I turned my car around and drove straight home, calling my best friend on the way to tell her what happened. She was furious. "What kind of psycho invites someone to an abandoned building for a first date?" she asked. "I don't know," I said, half laughing, half shaking. But clearly I dodged a bullet. When I got home, I blocked Tyler on Plenty of Fish and deleted the app altogether. Lesson learned. When Kyle suggested we skip the typical dinner and a movie date, and instead cook dinner together at his place, I thought it sounded sweet and intimate. Plus, I love pasta, and he swore he had a killer homemade Alfredo recipe. It felt like a cozy, low-key way to get to know each other. But I should have known things would get weird when he had texted me before the date asking, "Do you believe in ghosts?" Not really, I replied, thinking he was joking. His response came instantly. "You will after tonight." Any sane person might have canceled right then, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe he was just quirky, I told myself. Quirky can be fun, right? When I arrived at his apartment, the first thing I noticed was the smell of sage. Not like a casual hint of sage wafting through the air. No, this was aggressive sage. It hit me like a wall of herbal smoke the second he opened the door. "Chloe," he said, grinning widely. Come in, come in." "Hey, Kyle," I said, stepping inside. "Wow, smells earthy in here." "Oh yeah," he said, waving his hand like it was nothing. "I just saged the place, to cleanse the energy. You can never be too careful." "Right," I said, nodding slowly. His apartment was neat and cozy, with bookshelves crammed full of random knickknacks and a big tapestry of a full moon hanging on the wall. A few candles flickered on the kitchen counter, and the dining table was already set for two. It was charming, in a slightly chaotic way. "So are you ready to make the best pasta of your life?" he asked, grabbing a chef's apron from a hook by the stove. "Definitely," I said, trying to focus on the pasta and not the fact that he was wearing a necklace with what looked like a crystal pendulum dangling from it. We got to work chopping garlic and grating Parmesan, and for a little while, everything felt normal. Kyle was funny and enthusiastic, and he clearly knew his way around the kitchen. But then, as we were boiling the pasta, he casually turned to me and said, "By the way, I should probably warn you, this place is haunted." I froze, the colander in my hands. "Haunted?" "Yeah," he said, stirring the sauce like he'd just told me it might rain tomorrow. "I've lived here for 2 years, and I'm pretty sure there's a ghost. Her name's Margaret." "Margaret," I repeated, unsure if he was joking. "Yeah," he said, nodding earnestly. "She's harmless, though. Mostly." "Mostly?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Well, she does knock things over sometimes," he said, shrugging. "And she's not a fan of garlic. But other than that, she's cool." I stared at him, trying to decide if this was some elaborate prank. "How do you know her name is Margaret?" "Oh, I asked her," he said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I used a spirit board." She spelled it out. "You mean a Ouija board?" I asked. "Yeah, but I prefer to call it a spirit board. Sounds less spooky, Right?" I said, nodding slowly. I was starting to regret not just suggesting takeout. As if on cue, one of the candles on the counter flickered wildly and went out. Kyle gasped. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "It's probably just a draft," I said, trying to sound calm. "There's no draft," he said, glancing around the room. "Margaret, is that you?" "Kyle," I said, holding up a hand. "Please don't talk to the ghost." "Why not?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Because we're making pasta," I said, as if that was a valid reason. He laughed. All right, I'll save the ghost talk for later. Let's eat." We sat down at the table, and to his credit, the pasta was amazing. Creamy, garlicky, perfectly cooked. It was everything he'd promised. For a brief moment, I thought maybe the night was turning around. But then, halfway through dinner, Kyle froze, his fork hovering in midair. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. "Hear what?" I asked, pausing mid-bite. "That tapping," he said, his eyes darting toward the hallway. "It's coming from the bedroom." I strained my ears, and sure enough, there was a faint tapping sound. It could have been anything, pipes, a tree branch against the window, but Kyle looked like he was about to go full Ghostbusters. "Margaret," he called out, his voice firm. "If that's you, give us a sign." "Kyle," I said quickly, "please don't." Before I could finish, one of the forks on the table clattered to the floor. Kyle's eyes widened. "Oh my God," he whispered. "She's here." "Or the fork just fell," I said, trying to keep my cool. "That happens sometimes." "No," he said, shaking his head. "That was her. She's trying to tell us something." I groaned. "Kyle, can we just finish dinner? Please." But he was already on his feet, grabbing his crystal necklace and holding it like a talisman. "Margaret," he said loudly, "we mean you no harm. If you have a message for us, speak now." The apartment was silent, except for the sound of the boiling pot of water we'd forgotten to turn off. I sat there, torn between wanting to laugh and wanting to bolt for the door. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Kyle turned to me, his face pale. Did you see that? He asked. Yes, I said, because it's probably bad wiring. It's not the wiring, he said, shaking his head. It's her. She's upset about something. Maybe she's upset that we're eating garlic, I said sarcastically. Kyle gasped. You're right. She hates garlic. That must be it. Before I could stop him, he grabbed the garlic bread off the table, marched to the trash can, and threw it away. There, he said. Happy now, Margaret? I buried my face in my hands. Kyle, I'm begging you, can we just sit down and eat? He hesitated, glancing around the room like he was expecting Margaret to materialize at any second. Finally, he sighed and sat back down. Fine, he said. But if anything else happens, I'm getting the sage. The rest of the meal was relatively uneventful, though Kyle kept glancing nervously at the hallway. By the time we finished, I was more than ready to leave. Thanks for dinner, I said, grabbing my coat. It was memorable. Yeah, he said, smiling sheepishly. Sorry if I freaked you out. I just take this stuff seriously, you know. Totally, I said, inching toward the door. Well, good luck with Margaret. Thanks, he said. I think she likes you, by the way. Great, I said, forcing a smile. That's great. As I walked to my car, I couldn't help but laugh. The pasta had been delicious, but the haunting? Not so much. One thing was certain, I wasn't about to share my leftovers with Margaret. When Matt suggested going to a cozy cafe for our first date, I thought it was a fantastic idea. He mentioned he loved deep conversations, and I figured we'd talk about books, movies, Netflix shows, maybe even share some embarrassing childhood stories. What I didn't expect was to be launched headfirst into a rabbit hole of paranoia and, well, theories. I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early and grabbed a table by the window. It was one of those cute places with mismatched furniture and a menu written in colorful chalk on a giant blackboard. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and indie folk music hummed softly in the background. It was exactly the kind of place where you'd expect to have a pleasant, normal first date. Matt showed up right on time, wearing a flannel shirt and a beanie that screamed artsy intellectual. He smiled as he approached, and I felt a small wave of relief. He looked cute, normal even. Maybe this would actually go well. Chloe, he asked, sliding into the seat across from me. Hi, Matt, I said, smiling. Nice to meet you. You too, he said, pulling off his beanie and setting it on the table. This place is great. I love the vibe. Me too, I said. So, how's your day been? Oh, you know, he said, shrugging. Just the usual. Did some research, listened to a couple of podcasts, tried to keep a low profile. I laughed, assuming he was joking. A low profile, huh? Someone after you? His expression turned serious. Not me specifically, he said, lowering his voice. But you can never be too careful. They're always watching. I blinked, unsure how to respond. Who's they? Matt leaned forward, glancing around the cafe like he was checking for hidden cameras. The government. Big tech. Corporations. You name it. Oh, I said, laughing nervously. Right. Totally. I'm serious, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you know your phone listens to you even when it's off? They're collecting data on all of us. Every text, every Google search, it's all being stored in some massive database. Wow, I said, trying to keep my tone light. That's intense. It's not just intense, he said, shaking his head. It's the truth. People think I'm crazy, but I've done the research. The evidence is out there if you know where to look. At this point, I was starting to regret not ordering wine instead of coffee. The waitress came by to take our orders, and for a brief moment, I thought we might steer the conversation back to something normal. I asked for a latte, and Matt got an Americano, but as soon as the waitress walked away, he leaned in again. Speaking of coffee, he said, his eyes narrowing. Do you know what they're putting in it? Caffeine? I guessed. He scoffed. Caffeine is just the beginning. They're lacing it with chemicals to keep us docile. Think about it. Why do you think coffee shops are everywhere? It's not just a business strategy. It's a control mechanism. I stared at him, trying to decide if he was joking. He wasn't. Okay, I said cautiously, but wouldn't it be easier to just, put those chemicals in water? Everyone drinks water. They already do, he said, nodding solemnly. Fluoride. It's not for your teeth. It's to keep you complacent. Right, I said, taking a slow sip of my clearly poisoned water. Good to know. The conversation only got weirder from there. Matt launched into a monologue about 5G towers, chemtrails, and how birds were actually government surveillance drones. Have you ever seen a baby pigeon? He asked, raising an eyebrow. No, I admitted. Exactly, he said, leaning back triumphantly. Because they don't exist. The government rolls out new bird drones fully grown. It's all part of the surveillance state. I couldn't tell if I was more horrified or impressed by his commitment to the bit. Was it even a bit? I wasn't sure anymore. At one point, I tried to steer the conversation towards something more grounded. So, I said, what do you do for work? I'm a truth seeker, he said, folding his arms. Right? I said. But how do you pay your bills? Oh, I freelance, he said vaguely. Writing mostly. Blogs, forums, that kind of thing. Gotta get the message out, you know. Sure, I said, nodding. That makes sense. Does it? He asked, tilting his head. Or is that just what they want you to think? I opened my mouth to respond, but honestly I had nothing. The waitress returned with our drinks, and I immediately took a big sip of my latte, hoping the caffeine might help me survive the rest of this date. Matt, however, just stared at his Americano, frowning. What's wrong? I asked. Do you think they spit in this? He asked, his voice low. What? No, I said, laughing. Why would they do that? Because I'm asking questions, he said, tapping the side of his head. People don't like that. I'm pretty sure the waitress doesn't care about your questions, I said, trying to reassure him. She just wants a tip. Maybe, he said, still eyeing the coffee suspiciously. Or maybe she's part of it. Part of what? He leaned forward, lowering his voice again. The system. The machine. The agenda. At this point, I wasn't even pretending to hide my discomfort. You know, I said, glancing at my phone. I just remembered I have an early meeting tomorrow, so I should probably get going. Wait, he said, reaching for my hand. Chloe, before you go, there's something you need to know. I froze, my hand halfway to my purse. What? He looked me dead in the eye. The moon landing was fake. I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or just run. Okay, I said slowly. Thanks for letting me know. You're welcome, he said, nodding solemnly. Most people can't handle the truth, but you seem different. I can tell you're a critical thinker. Thanks, I said, standing up. I'll think critically about that. Great, he said, smiling. And hey, if you ever want to know more, just let me know. I've got a whole YouTube playlist that explains everything. Can't wait, I said, edging toward the door. As I walked to my car, I couldn't help but laugh. The date had been an absolute train wreck, but at least it gave me a great story to tell my friends. And who knows, maybe Matt was right about one thing. I mean, have you ever seen a baby pigeon? When we suggested dinner and a magic show for our first date, I thought it sounded unique and fun. I mean, who doesn't like a little sleight of hand and some card tricks? But when I arrived at the restaurant, a small, dimly lit Italian place with red checkered tablecloths, I quickly realized that the magic show wasn't something we were going to watch together. Oh no, what was the magic show? I got there a few minutes early and was seated at a cozy table near the back. The place was charming in a slightly tacky way, with fake grapevines hanging from the ceiling and candles dripping wax onto old wine bottles. I was scrolling through my phone when I heard someone clear their throat dramatically. Are you Chloe? A voice asked. I looked up to see Will standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers. Well, not flowers exactly. Balloon flowers. A bright, squeaky bouquet of pink and yellow balloon daisies. He grinned and handed them to me with a flourish. For the lovely lady, he said, bowing slightly. Oh, thank you, I said, taking the balloons. They squeaked loudly as I set them on the table. These are different. I like to keep things interesting, he said, winking as he slid into the seat across from me. He was wearing a dark button-down shirt, but the sleeves were rolled up to reveal what looked like a deck of cards stuffed into one of his pockets. So, he said, leaning forward, how was your day? Pretty good, I said, smiling. What about you? Busy, he said, reaching into his other pocket. I've been practicing something special for tonight. Oh, I asked. What kind of? Pick a card, he said, cutting me off. He fanned out a deck of cards in front of me, his grin widening. Any card. I stared at him for a moment, unsure if he was serious. But the eager look on his face told me he was. I sighed inwardly and pulled a card from the deck. Okay, got it. Now don't let me see it, he said, dramatically turning his head to the side and covering his eyes with one hand. Memorize it, and then put it back in the deck. I did as he asked, sliding the card back into the deck. Will shuffled the cards with an exaggerated flair, tossing them from one hand to the other like he was auditioning for a Vegas show. He even made a few whoosh noises with his mouth, which I tried very hard not to laugh at. "All right," he said, holding up the deck. "Is this your card?" He pulled a card from the top and held it up with a flourish. It wasn't my card. No," I said. "Really?" He frowned, looking genuinely surprised. "Huh. Okay, hold on." He shuffled the deck again, this time muttering under his breath. "The cards never lie, let's try this again." He pulled another card and held it up. "How about now?" "Nope," I said, biting my lip to keep from laughing. Will frowned again, his confidence visibly faltering. "All right, third time's the charm," he said, rifling through the deck like a man on a mission. "Is this your card?" "Still no," I said. He froze, staring at the card in his hand like it had personally betrayed him. "Weird," he muttered. "This usually works." "It's okay," I said, trying to be nice. "Maybe we should just—" "Wait," he said, cutting me off. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled napkin. "Sometimes the card travels. Check this out." He unfolded the napkin with great ceremony, only to reveal nothing. His face fell. "Huh, that's not supposed to happen." "It's fine," I said, waving it off. "Card tricks are hard." No, no, no," he insisted, shoving the napkin back into his pocket. "Let me make it up to you. I've got another trick that'll blow your mind." Before I could protest, he reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small red scarf. "Now watch closely," he said, his voice low and dramatic. "I'm going to make this scarf disappear." I watched as he stuffed the scarf into his fist, 1 inch at a time, until it was completely hidden. Then he opened his hand with a flourish. "Ta-da!" he said, grinning. The scarf was still there, hanging limply between his fingers. There was an awkward pause. I said, unsure how to respond. "Wait," he said quickly, shoving the scarf back into his fist. "I didn't do it right. Let me try again." I sat there, trying not to laugh as he repeated the trick 3 more times, each attempt ending with the scarf stubbornly refusing to disappear. By the 4th try, he was visibly sweating. "Maybe we should just order," I suggested gently. "Yeah," he said, sighing and stuffing the scarf back into his pocket. "Good idea." The waiter came by and took our orders, and for a brief, blissful moment, it seemed like the magic show was over. But then, as soon as the waiter left, Will leaned across the table and said, "You're going to love this one. It's my signature trick." "Oh, okay," I said, bracing myself. He pulled a coin from his pocket and held it up. "Watch carefully," he said. "I'm going to make this coin disappear and reappear behind your ear." "Cool," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. He placed the coin in his palm and closed his fist around it. Then he waved his other hand over his fist, muttering something that I think was supposed to sound like a magic incantation. When he opened his hand, the coin was gone. "Ta-da," he said, grinning triumphantly. "Nice," I said, nodding. "So, is it behind my ear now?" "Not yet," he said, reaching toward my head. "Hold still." I froze as he fumbled around my ear, his fingers brushing my hair awkwardly. He patted behind my ear once, then twice, then frowned. "Weird," he muttered. "It's not there." "Maybe it's behind your ear," I said, half joking. His eyes lit up. "Good idea." He reached behind his own ear, but of course, the coin wasn't there either. He checked his other pocket, his sleeves, and even under the table. Nothing. "Okay, this is officially embarrassing," he said, laughing nervously. "I swear, I'm usually much better at this." "It's fine," I said, smiling. "Really? Magic is hard." He sighed and leaned back in his chair. "You're too nice," he said. "Most people would have walked out by now." "Well," I said, chuckling, "I'm definitely entertained." The rest of the date was interesting. Every few minutes, Will would randomly try another trick, only for it to go hilariously wrong. By the end of the night, he'd spilled water on the table while attempting a floating cup illusion, accidentally flung a deck of cards across the restaurant, and somehow managed to get a rubber band tangled in his hair. When the check came, he reached for it and said, "Let me guess your total. It's $42.87. "It's actually $39.50, the waiter said, looking unimpressed. "Close enough," Will muttered, pulling out his wallet. As we walked out of the restaurant, he turned to me and said, "So what did you think? Did I wow you?" I smiled. "You definitely kept me on my toes." "Awesome," he said, grinning. "So second date?" I hesitated. Will was sweet, and he clearly meant well, but I wasn't sure I could survive another night of disappearing scarves and awkward patting behind my ears. "I'll let you know," I said, giving him a polite smile. As I walked to my car, I couldn't help but laugh. The date hadn't been magical, but it was definitely unforgettable. No one will see this, but it's worth the story. I'm living with my roommate in Los Angeles, both of 21 and in our last year of college. His mom and dad got divorced right after he was born. Dad remarried and had another family. Because of the bad blood between mom and dad, he never knew his half-siblings, one boy and one girl. Turns out the half-sister transferred into our college when she was 19 and came over to visit with a friend of hers, meet the brother she never knew, etc. We spend the day together and the half-sister and I hit it off, while my friend and her friend do the same. Later on, being freshly 21, we buy lots of booze, mixed drinks, and we all get incredibly plastered. We start playing a college game called In the Dark. Stupid game, I don't even remember how it goes now, but you had to have all the lights off when you played it. And there was even more booze, of course. At some point the girls decide they want to bang us, and giggling they tell us to come to our rooms after they have some girl time, or something like that. We wait about 5 minutes, then we each head off to our separate rooms to plow some sweet young pussy. Remember, we turned off all the lights in the house to play the game, and everyone's so drunk they can barely stand. It's important. It's also important to know at this point that both girls are about the same height and build. So I go into my room, hear a giggling girl in my bed, strip down as best as I can without falling on my ass too many times, jump in, and we do the deed. Despite the alcohol, things turn out pretty damned well. Or maybe because of it, I don't know. After a while we pass out. The next morning I wake up, very hungover, and see the girl sleeping next to me. It takes me a while to puzzle out the fact that it isn't the half-sister, but her friend who's in bed with me. So where's the half-sister then? Well, the combination of the dark, our drunken confusion, and the similar build of the girls, plus the fact that they mistook our rooms and each went into the wrong one, meant that I ended up with the friend, and my friend ended up with my half-sister. No one realized the mistake until the next morning. Best part was when they came out of the bedroom red-faced and embarrassed as hell. We teased them mercilessly about it. The bedroom walls were thin, and the half-sister was a screamer when she came, so we knew she had a rockin' good time of it. Definitely a first date for the record books. Not being big in the club, party, or dance scene, I tend to use online sites to get dates. Part of the problem is since I live in the middle of nowhere, every person I'd even consider dating is at least an hour drive away. Anyway, onto the story. So, I met the girl on the online site. Her profile was nice. Her pictures were neat. She had a little extra meat to her, but I'm perfectly alright with that. We started messaging, found out she was a gamer, she liked science-wise stuff, had a quirky sense of humor, and we messaged several times a day for about a month. When we finally decided to meet up, we decided on going to a fancy Asian restaurant that was halfway, so neither one of us needed to drive too far, which was my idea because I like being practical, especially when I was having job trouble at the moment. Well, when I arrived, I noticed a few details. Her pictures did not do her justice. Namely that she was easily about 350 to 400 pounds. She was wearing a skimpy outfit that had her fat rolls pouring over the edges. She had high heels on which I could not comprehend how they functioned on account of the law of physics. She must not have practiced putting makeup on in a long time, because she looked similar to a clown. And when she spoke, oh God. I understand everyone has their way of speaking. I know of accents, speech impediments, and vernacular, but she spoke in a way similar to Harold Green from the Red Green Show. Whatever, this is all superficial, and not being one to judge too harshly, and I am not one to turn down a potential friend, I decided to just go with it, knowing I had no interest in pursuing anything beyond friendship. Sorry, not a chubby chaser. So we go in, and the first thing I notice is when the ladies at front see her, their eyes go wide. They look at each other and begin to speak rapidly in Cantonese/Mandarin before the one at the desk greets us and takes us to our seats with only one menu. That was a red flag because my date didn't have one herself. Our conversations weren't anywhere near as complex or interesting as they were online, which was another flag because she seemed to not grasp the basic topics we covered, such as games, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, gardening, or even local politics. I would chalk it up as anxiety, but no, she had no trouble talking. She just had no idea about any of these things. Then she decided to start talking about sex. Yeah, no, I don't mind talking about anything really, but I don't want to hear about the amount of sex you've had, how you like your sex, what your last boyfriend did to you, and just what you want to do to me. Not only is that rather inappropriate first date conversation topic, also EW. Finally, to save me from a topic that churned my stomach, the food arrived. And I saw just why she didn't need a menu. She pretty much ordered the entire goddamn thing plus several alcoholic beverages versus my soup, steamed rice, and Hunan pork dish. She proceeded to just a bit of everything, shove it on her plate, and then shove it in her mouth, showing the table manners of a hyperactive bonobo, all while trying to keep up the previous topic of conversation that I constantly tried to deviate from to something, anything, that wasn't an insult to my senses, but to no avail. The night continued in this disgusting, sauce-covered trend for a few hours until she had basically eaten everything she ordered and had some of mine as well. The bill came to a little over $200, which I, of course, had to cover because she magically forgot any of her money. Sorry if it seems rude, but if someone wants to get some extremely expensive stuff and I inform them beforehand that I don't have a lot of money, I expect them to chip in even a little bit. On our way out, she grabbed my arm, tried to pull me close, and whispered how she wanted me and wanted me to come back to her place. I placed my hand on hers, smiled gently, and said no. Now please let go of my arm. Luckily she did, and so I gave her an extremely awkward hug, told her I was going home, and promptly jumped in my car and got the hell out of there. Last message I got from her, about an hour after I got home, was asking why I didn't find her attractive, and why I was such a pansy to not fuck her on the first date. I simply said, I would have nothing against continuing our conversations online, but I don't think we had much chemistry. When Mike suggested an escape room for our first date, I thought it sounded fun. Different, sure, but fun. I'd done a couple of escape rooms before with friends, and I liked the puzzles and teamwork aspect of it. Plus, it seemed like a low-pressure way to get to know someone. What I didn't know was that Mike was about to turn a laid-back date into a high-stakes, sweat-inducing disaster. The escape room was in a small strip mall wedged between a nail salon and a vape shop. The sign above the door read Escape Haven in big, blocky letters with the tagline, "Do you have what it takes to break free?" Inside, the place was dimly lit, with dramatic posters of locked doors and ticking clocks. A bored-looking guy behind the counter greeted us with a half-hearted welcome. "Hi," Mike said enthusiastically, clapping his hands together. "We're here for the Haunted Manor room." The guy raised an eyebrow. "That's one of our more advanced rooms. Are you sure you want to start with that one?" "Oh, we're sure," Mike said firmly. "I'm a pro at this." I smiled nervously. "A pro?" "Yeah," Mike said, grinning at me. "I've done like 20 escape rooms. I'm kind of obsessed." "Cool," I said, though the intensity in his eyes made me slightly uneasy. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be impressed or concerned. The guy behind the counter handed us a clipboard with a waiver to sign. "Just a heads up," he said. "You've got an hour to escape, and there's no yelling or physical force allowed. We've had incidents." Mike chuckled. "Don't worry. I've got this." We were led into the escape room, which was decked out like a creepy Victorian parlor. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, dusty portraits of scowling ancestors, and a grandfather clock that ticked ominously. In the corner, a fake fireplace flickered with an eerie orange glow, and an old phonograph played scratchy, unsettling music. The game master explained the rules, handed us a walkie-talkie for hints, and left us to it. The door clicked shut behind us, and the timer on the wall started counting down from 60:00. I turned to Mike, ready to start solving clues, but he was already pacing the room like some kind of deranged detective. "Okay," he said, his eyes darting around. "First things first, let's search for hidden compartments. They love to hide keys and books and stuff." "All right," I said, heading toward a bookshelf. "Let's check it out." No, Mike said, waving me off. "I'll handle the bookshelf. You check the fireplace." I frowned. "The fireplace?" "Yeah," he said impatiently. "Sometimes they hide things in the logs or behind the grate. Just look." I knelt by the fake fireplace and poked around awkwardly. Meanwhile, Mike was tearing through the bookshelf like his life depended on it, flipping books open, shaking them, and tossing them onto the floor. "Nothing," he muttered. "Where are they hiding it? Maybe we should just—" I started, but Mike interrupted me. "Wait," he shouted, holding up a small brass key he'd found wedged between two books. "Got it! Let's go!" He ran to a locked cabinet and fumbled with the key, his hands shaking with excitement. Come on, he muttered, finally getting it open. Inside was a handwritten note and a small blacklight flashlight. He snatched them both up and thrust the note at me. "Read this," he said. "I'll scan the room for hidden messages." I glanced at the note, which looked like it had been written by someone trying very hard to sound spooky. "The truth lies where the clock strikes 12. I think it's about the clock," I said, pointing to the grandfather clock. Mike was already shining the black light on random surfaces, muttering to himself. No invisible ink here, nothing on the walls. Wait, what about the ceiling? Mike, I said, trying to get his attention. Maybe we should look at the clock? No, 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 he said, waving me off again. Trust me, I know how these things work. They're trying to mislead us. I sighed and walked over to the clock myself. Sure enough, there was a small compartment that popped open when I moved the hands to 12. Inside was another key and a piece of paper with a riddle on it. I turned to show Mike, but he was too busy trying to climb onto the furniture to check the ceiling. What are you doing? I asked. Sometimes they hide clues up high, he said, balancing precariously on a chair. You'd be surprised. Or, I said, holding up the key, we could just use this. He froze, staring at the key in my hand. Where did you find that? In the clock, I said. You know, like the note said? He climbed down, looking slightly annoyed. Fine, let's try it. The next 40 minutes were a whirlwind of chaos. Mike barked orders at me like we were in a military operation, snatched clues out of my hands before I could finish reading them, and accused me of sabotaging the mission when I suggested we ask for a hint. Hints are for quitters, he snapped, pacing the room. We're not quitters, Chloe. We're winners. It's just a game, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. We don't have to win. He stopped dead in his tracks and stared at me like I'd just insulted his entire family. It's not just a game, he said, his voice low and serious. It's about proving ourselves. To who? I asked, genuinely confused. To the room, he said, like it was obvious. By the time the clock hit 10 o'clock, we were both sweating and frazzled. I wanted to ask for a hint, but Mike refused to even touch the walkie-talkie. We're so close, he insisted, even though we were clearly not close at all. When the timer finally ran out, the game master's voice crackled over the intercom. Time's up. Better luck next time. Mike groaned, dropping to his knees like he'd just lost a championship game. No, he shouted, punching the floor dramatically. Hey, it's okay, I said, trying to comfort him. We did our best. Our best wasn't good enough, he muttered, shaking his head. I should have known better. I should have been faster. The game master unlocked the door and stepped inside, looking mildly amused. You guys did pretty well, he said. You were just one clue away from the final key. Mike shot to his feet. One clue. One clue. Show me. The poor guy looked startled, but led us over to the puzzle we'd missed. Mike stared at it like he was trying to burn it with his mind. I can't believe I didn't see that, he muttered. I'm so stupid. You're not stupid, I said, though at this point, I was seriously reconsidering my life choices. I need to do it again, Mike said suddenly, turning to the game master. Reset the room. I'll pay extra. We can't reset it right now, the guy said awkwardly. We have another group coming in. Mike looked genuinely devastated. Fine, he said, grabbing his jacket. But I'm coming back tomorrow. As we walked out of the building, Mike was uncharacteristically quiet. I thought maybe he was reflecting on his behavior, but then he turned to me and said, You know, if you'd just followed my lead, we probably would have escaped. That was the moment I decided there wouldn't be a second date. When Ryan asked me to go to a haunted house for our first date, I thought it sounded exciting. It was October, after all, and I loved spooky season. Halloween is my favorite. A haunted house seemed like the perfect mix of fun and adrenaline. And maybe we'd even get that cute, rom-com moment where I'd grab his arm and laugh nervously while he played the brave protector. Spoiler alert, it wasn't like that. At all. Not one bit. The haunted house was called Dark Hollow Manor, located just outside the city in a rundown, foggy lot that looked like it had been pulled straight out of a horror movie. The building was this massive, decrepit-looking Victorian mansion with boarded-up windows, fake cobwebs everywhere, and eerie green lights glowing from inside. A loudspeaker near the entrance blared creepy organ music and occasional blood-curdling screams. I was already impressed. They really went all out. Ryan showed up wearing a leather jacket and a confident grin, the kind of grin that said, "Don't worry, I've got this." "You ready to be scared out of your mind?" he asked, winking at me. "Totally," I said, smiling back. "How about you?" "Oh, I don't scare easily," he said, puffing out his chest. "These places are all about jump scares and cheap thrills. It's nothing I can't handle." "Cool," I said, though his bravado felt a little rehearsed. Still, I figured he'd be fun to hang out with. I mean, how bad could it be? We joined a group of about 10 people at the entrance, where a guy dressed as a zombie butler gave us the rules in a low, gravelly voice. No touching the actors, no running, and no refunds if you chicken out. Ryan laughed. Chicken out? As if. The zombie butler smirked and opened the creaky front door. Good luck, he said ominously. The group shuffled inside, and the door slammed shut behind us. The air smelled like artificial fog and something vaguely metallic, probably fake blood. The lights were dim, casting long, flickering shadows across the room. Somewhere in the distance, a chainsaw revved. This is nothing, Ryan whispered to me as we moved deeper into the house. I've seen scarier stuff on Netflix. I nodded, suppressing a laugh. He was trying so hard to be cool. I didn't have the heart to tell him that I could already see a guy in a clown mask hiding behind a curtain up ahead. Sure enough, as we walked past, the clown jumped out, waving a fake axe and screaming. Half the group shrieked and stumbled back, but Ryan let out a noise I can only describe as a high-pitched yelp. He grabbed my arm, not protectively, but like he was using me as a human shield, and ducked behind me. Whoa, he said, laughing nervously. They got me off guard, that's all. Totally knew it was coming. Right? I said, biting back a grin. Totally. We continued through the house, weaving through dark hallways and creepy, elaborately decorated rooms. There was a dining room with a long table covered in rotting fake food and severed mannequin hands, a bedroom with a blood-soaked mattress, and a doll that kept rocking in a chair by itself, and a hallway lined with mirrors that distorted our reflections into nightmarish shapes. It was all really well done, and I was having a blast. Ryan, on the other hand, was struggling. Every time an actor jumped out or screamed, he flinched so hard I thought he might throw his back out. He clung to my arm like a terrified child, muttering things like, "That's so lame," and "They're trying too hard," in between startled gasps. At one point, a guy dressed as a zombie lunged at us, and Ryan actually shouted, "Dude, personal space," before hiding behind me again. "Are you okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "Me? Oh yeah, I'm fine," he said, trying to laugh it off. "I'm just, letting you take the lead. Ladies first, right?" "Right," I said, trying not to roll my eyes. I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take. The final stretch of the haunted house was the scariest. It was a pitch-black maze filled with strobe lights, fog, and actors in horrifying masks who would sneak up and whisper things like, "I see you," or "Run while you can." I thought it was amazing. Ryan, however, was practically hyperventilating. "I can't see anything," he hissed, gripping my hand so tightly it hurt. "Where are we supposed to go?" "Just follow the path," I said, trying to stay calm. "It's not that hard." Suddenly, a woman dressed as a ghost appeared in front of us, her pale face illuminated by a flickering flashlight. She let out a bone-chilling scream, and Ryan absolutely lost it. He screamed, really screamed, then bolted in the opposite direction, leaving me and the rest of the group behind. "Ryan!" I called, but he didn't stop. I could hear him crashing through props and shouting, "Nope, nope, nope," as he ran. The ghost actress looked at me, shrugged, and stepped back into the shadows. "Sorry about him," I muttered, embarrassed. Eventually, I found Ryan in the gift shop at the exit, sitting on a bench and looking like he'd just run a marathon. His hair was disheveled, and his face was pale and sweaty. "You made it out," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Yeah," he said weakly. "That was intense." "It was fun," I said. "Thanks for suggesting it." He forced a grin. "Yeah, no problem. I mean, I wasn't scared or anything. I just wasn't expecting them to go that hard, you know." "Right?" I said, nodding. "Totally. You were super brave." "Thanks," he said, perking up a little. "So, do you want to grab a drink or something?" I thought about it for a moment. He wasn't a bad guy, really. But after watching him abandon me in a haunted house, I wasn't exactly feeling the spark. "You know," I said, "I think I'm just gonna call it a night. But thanks for the adventure." "Yeah, sure," he said, looking disappointed. "Next time, we'll do something less intense." "Maybe," I said, though we both knew there wasn't going to be a next time. As I walked to my car, I couldn't help but laugh. The haunted house had been terrifying, but the real horror? That was the date. About a year ago, my friend set me up on a blind date. The plan was to meet at a restaurant. This restaurant was different. Each group of people got their separate room. So I'm sitting at a restaurant, and I see this rather good-looking female heading my way. Okay, she was hot, and I was nervous. She sat down, and the date began. I was so nervous that I kept repeating myself, and the whole time I had food in my mouth, Because I was so nervous I began to sweat badly. As I noticed my gray shirt slowly turn in dark gray-black due to all the sweat, I coughed up my drink onto her shirt. At this point, she stormed off to the bathroom. Right that second I came up with an idea. I called my friend, who set us up, and told him my plan. I also checked to see how long I had been on the date for. I saw the women coming back. Annoyed, she said, "I'm leaving." Without missing a beat, I stood up and said, "Wait, this isn't a real date, I'm an actor, and this is MTV's disaster date." At that moment I died inside. She looked so shocked but started laughing. I quickly got her out of the restaurant, to make sure no one ruined my plan. I told her she had been on the date for 73 minutes and gave her $73. She asked if she was going to be on TV, and I told her I needed her number and address to send her release papers to show her on television. After all was said and done, I called her, days later, came over with fake release papers, and bullshitted my way through 2 hours of conversation. At the end, she told me I was cute and wanted to know if we wanted to get drinks. We dated for 2 months, while she waited for her T.V appearance. When Jake suggested we meet at a trendy coffee shop downtown for our first date, I thought it sounded like a safe, normal choice. Finally, I thought, a guy who isn't trying to impress me with something ridiculous like axe throwing or skydiving. The cafe he picked, Bean in Bloom, was one of those overly aesthetic places with exposed brick walls, hanging plants, and baristas who looked like they moonlighted in indie bands. I got there a little early and grabbed a small table in the corner. The place was busy, filled with 20-somethings sipping oat milk lattes and typing furiously on MacBooks. I scrolled through my phone while I waited, occasionally glancing at the door to see if Jake had arrived yet. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I was just starting to wonder if he was going to stand me up when he finally walked in. I knew it was him the second he stepped through the door. How could I not? He was wearing a denim jacket with a fur collar, ripped black jeans, and sunglasses. Indoors. At 3 p.m. His hair was perfectly tousled in that way that probably took an hour to achieve, and he carried himself like he expected paparazzi to leap out from behind the espresso machine at any moment. "Chloe," he called out, spotting me immediately. His voice was louder than it needed to be, drawing the attention of several nearby tables. He strode across the room like he was walking a red carpet, and I noticed he was holding his phone in front of him, filming himself. "Hey guys," he said into the phone's camera. "Just arrived at this amazing little cafe for a date. Can't wait to see how this goes. Stay tuned." Then he turned the camera toward me. "And here's the lovely Chloe. Say hi to my followers." I blinked, caught completely off guard. Hi." Jake grinned and stopped recording. "Sorry about that," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Just a little intro for my IG. You know how it is." "Sure," I said, though I really didn't. "How many followers do you have?" He waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, enough. Not like I'm counting or anything." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Anyway, you look great." "Thanks," I said, smiling politely. "So, what do you do for work?" "Oh, I'm an influencer," he said, leaning back in his chair like he'd just announced he was a neurosurgeon or something equally impressive. "That's cool," I said, trying to sound supportive. "What kind of content do you make?" "Lifestyle," he replied, flipping his sunglasses up onto his head. "Fashion, fitness, travel, you name it. I'm all about inspiring people to live their best lives." "Wow," I said. "That sounds busy." "It is," he said, nodding solemnly. "But, it's not just a job. It's a calling." I was about to ask more when he suddenly pulled out his phone again. "Hang on," he said. "This lighting is amazing. I need to grab a quick shot." Before I could respond, he stood up and started taking selfies. Not casual, one-and-done selfies, but a full-on photo shoot. He tilted his head at different angles, adjusted his jacket, and even grabbed a cappuccino from a nearby table, without asking, to use as a prop. The couple sitting there gave him a confused look, but he just smiled and handed it back like this was totally normal behavior. When he finally sat back down, he scrolled through the pictures, muttering to himself. Not bad. Could use a little more contrast. Maybe a filter." "So," I said, trying to steer the conversation back to something resembling a normal date, "how did you get into influencing?" "Oh, it's a long story," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Basically, I just knew I was meant to be in the public eye, Like I've always had this presence." "Right?" I said, nodding slowly. "That's cool." Just then, the waitress arrived with our drinks. I reached for my latte, but Jake stopped me. "Wait, don't touch it yet." I froze. Why not? Because, he said, pulling out his phone again. I need to get a shot of the table. The foam art is perfect. I watched in stunned silence as he arranged our drinks and the silverware into what I could only describe as a flat-lay crime scene. He snapped several pictures from different angles, occasionally muttering things like #aesthetic, and this is gonna pop. Okay, he said finally, putting his phone down. You can drink it now. Thanks, I said dryly, taking a sip. I was starting to regret coming here. So anyway, he said, leaning forward, tell me about yourself. What do you do? I'm a graphic designer, I said. Mostly freelance. Nice, he said, nodding. That's creative. I like that. Yeah, it's fun, I said. What about you? Do you do anything besides influencing? Not really, he said. It's kind of a full-time gig. But, I'm always looking for ways to grow my brand. Speaking of which, he trailed off and grabbed his phone again. What are you doing now? I asked, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. Just posting a quick story, he said, holding his phone up. Hey guys, he said into the camera. Having an amazing time on this date. She's super cool, really down to earth. I think this one's a keeper. He winked, then put his phone down. I stared at him, completely baffled. Did you just tell your followers I'm a keeper? He grinned. Yeah, they're gonna love you. Oh, I said, laughing nervously. That's flattering. It wasn't. It was weird. The rest of the date continued in much the same way. Every time I tried to have a real conversation, Jake would somehow bring it back to himself, his brand, or his followers. He kept name-dropping other influencers I'd never heard of, talking about engagement rates and sponsored content like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. At one point, I excused myself to go to the bathroom. While I was washing my hands, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled out my phone and searched for Jake's Instagram profile. It didn't take long to find. It was the same username he'd used to sign the receipt for our drinks. He had 12 followers. 12. Half of them were obviously bots, with usernames like @HotChicksForYou and profile pictures that looked stolen from stock photo websites. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. This guy had spent the entire date acting like he was some kind of social media celebrity, and he didn't even have enough followers to fill a football team. When I got back to the table, Jake was still on his phone, probably editing one of the 50 pictures he'd taken earlier. Everything okay? He asked, glancing up at me. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. I just remembered I have an early meeting tomorrow, so I should probably head out. Oh, bummer, he said, looking genuinely disappointed. I was going to take you to this rooftop bar next. It's super exclusive. Great photo ops. Maybe another time, I said, grabbing my bag. Definitely, he said, standing up. I'll DM you later, okay? Zura, Elite. As I walked out of the cafe, I couldn't stop laughing. 12 followers. 12. I guess he wasn't wrong about living his best life. It just wasn't the life he thought it was. I had recently moved to a new town and didn't know anyone there. I decided to meet up with this gorgeous brunette for a second date out on the town. There was a big music festival going on in all the bars around town. Let's call this girl Sarah. Being the ignorant gentleman, I offered to cover Sarah's ticket to the music festival and the first round of drinks. The fact that she generously showed off the cleavage of her fake breasts helped cloud my judgment as well. On top of this, Sarah tells me that her sister is town for the weekend and wants her to come along. Let's call the sister Mary. This should have been red flag number 1. We start off at bar number 1, and Sarah tells me she wants to meet up with a bunch of her friends. Okay, maybe this won't be so bad. I thinking that I'll be out on the town with a bunch of cute girls. Nope. A group full of guys. Red flag number 2, right? Nope, not for me. After a couple rounds, Sarah starts getting openly flirtatious with one of the guys at the table. This is when I realized what was really happening. Sarah was using me to pay for her night, be DD, and keep her sister occupied while she flirted with some other dude. Being a proud young man, I would not stand for such a blow to my pride. How dare she do this with the guise of going on a second date? I idly chat with Mary, while coming up with a plan to get this bitch back. After a couple more rounds, we head off to the next bar to see a band play. Mary is decently cute and a pretty cool chick. She knew what was going on and apologized to me about it. Apparently this was a common thing for Sarah to do. No problem, I say. Yeah, no problem. My plan's already in action. I start flirting with Mary. First, small flirts here and there in front of Sarah to see how Sarah reacts. Sarah does not like this at all, since she's a controlling bitch and only wants me to do what she brought me out there to do. I keep flirting with Mary until, at one point, Sarah pulls Mary aside and tells her that she'd better not go home with me at all. Perfect. As the night goes on, I discover how annoying Sarah really is. She constantly whines to everyone about everything. She expects all of us to take care of her every need and give everything to her. I suppose she considered her fake breasts an investment and expected dividends. By the end of the night, I'm actually glad that I wasn't the one having to put up with her crap anymore. After a long night of flirting with Mary, I decide to make my move. I suggest to Mary that we go back to Sarah's place and call it a night. Mind you, we're downtown, far away from anyone's car, and I was the only one sober enough to drive or even find the car. I knew this, and I knew that by leaving Sarah alone with her real date downtown, she'd have quite a long and expensive journey back home. Wooed by my charms and a fair amount of alcohol, Mary agrees to leave with me without even thinking about her sister. Goal number 1 accomplished. We finally reach Sarah's place, and I convince Mary to let me stay the night. Saxy time follows. I remember to lock the bedroom door. More saxy time follows. Hours later, Sarah finally makes it home alone, says goodnight to her sister through the door, and goes straight to bed. I can tell how pissed Sarah is just by the way she's walking. Goal number 2 accomplished. I wake up early as crap in the morning the next day. I sneak out of bed, get dressed, and sneak out into the living room. Sarah's purse is lying right there on the table. Sarah and Mary are both passed out in their beds. At this point, I feel like Sarah and I are equal now as far as time wasted. Sarah led me on. I slept with her sister. Even. But she still tricked me into paying for that festival ticket, drinks, knowing she was just using me. I searched through Sarah's purse and reclaim a good portion of the money I'd spent on her. At that point, I head home and never talked to Sarah again. Mary kept in touch with me and thought it was pretty hilarious what I did. It's unfortunate she lives so far away. When I agreed to a first date with Josh, I should have known it was going to be weird. His opening line on Tinder was, "Do you believe in destiny, or should we just sing about it?" At the time, I thought it was quirky and kind of charming. Now, standing in front of Sing It Loud karaoke bar, I was seriously questioning my life choices. The place was eclectic, to put it kindly. Neon lights buzzed in the windows, promising 2 for $1 cocktails and free karaoke Fridays. A giant inflatable microphone leaned precariously against the building like it had seen better days. Inside, I could hear muffled but enthusiastic attempts at Whitney Houston's "I Will Always Love You." It sounded like someone was being strangled. I hesitated, glancing at my phone, tempted to fake an emergency. But before I could even finish the thought, Josh appeared. "Hey, you made it," he said, bounding toward me like an overexcited puppy. He was wearing a leather jacket that squeaked when he moved and dark sunglasses, even though it was nighttime. His hair was gelled to within an inch of its life, and he smelled faintly of Axe body spray. I forced a smile. "Hi, Josh," I said, trying to match his energy. "This place looks fun." "Fun? It's the best," he said, practically shouting. "And perfect for a first date. You can tell a lot about a person by what they sing. You ready to show me your soul?" "My soul?" I repeated, blinking. "Yeah," he said, nodding seriously. "Karaoke's not about singing, it's about feeling. It's about connecting with the music on a deeper level." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just followed him inside. The bar was dimly lit, with sticky floors and a faint smell of spilled beer and desperation. A small stage sat at one end of the room, complete with flickering disco lights and a machine that belched out fog at random intervals. A group of rowdy college students cheered as a guy in a cowboy hat belted out friends in low places. It was chaos, and I suddenly wished I were anywhere else. Josh, however, was in his element. He marched straight to the songbook, flipped through it like a man on a mission, and then turned to me with a grin that could only be described as unhinged. "I know exactly what I'm going to do," he said. "You?" I'll just watch for now," I said, hoping he wouldn't push it. "Nonsense," he said, grabbing my hand and dragging me toward the stage. "You can't come to a karaoke bar and not sing. It's basically illegal." Before I could protest, he handed me a microphone. I held it awkwardly, like it might electrocute me. "Seriously, I'm good," I said. "You go first." Josh's eyes lit up. "Oh, you want me to break the ice? Don't mind if I do." He grabbed the second microphone and marched onto the stage like he was auditioning for American Idol. The music started, and my stomach dropped as I recognized the opening notes of Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On. He didn't just pick a song, he picked that song. It got worse. Josh wasn't just singing. He was performing. He clutched the microphone with both hands, swaying dramatically as the music swelled. When he hit the first, Every Night in My Dreams, he closed his eyes and reached one hand toward the ceiling like he was summoning Celine's spirit. And the voice, let's just say it was ambitious. He wasn't anywhere near the right key, but he was loud. Very loud. People started turning to look. A guy at the bar snorted into his beer. A couple in the corner exchanged amused glances. I shrank into my seat, wishing I could sink through the floor. By the time Josh hit the chorus, he was fully committed. My heart will go on and all when, he howled, clutching his chest like he was experiencing real emotional pain. For reasons I couldn't understand, he also started doing dramatic hand gestures, pointing to the crowd, miming a ship sinking, and even fake crying. It was like watching a car crash. I couldn't look away. The audience was not impressed. Someone booed. A group of women near the stage giggled and whispered to each other. One guy shouted, "Next." But Josh didn't seem to care. If anything, the negativity spurred him on. He dropped to one knee, extending his arm toward me as if I were Rose and he were Jack, drowning in the icy waters of the Atlantic. "CHLOE," he wailed. "You're here. There's nothing I fear." I wanted to die. When the song finally ended, Josh stood and took an exaggerated bow. The applause was sparse. A few pity claps here and there. Someone coughed. But Josh didn't seem to notice. He strutted off the stage and plopped down next to me, panting like he'd just run a marathon. "So," he said, grinning, "what did you think?" I opened my mouth, trying to find a diplomatic way to respond, but he didn't wait for my answer. "Don't worry," he said, patting my hand. "I'll help you pick a song. Something simple. Maybe Let It Go from Frozen. Everyone loves that one. Oh, I really don't think. Or Bohemian Rhapsody. That's a crowd pleaser." Before I could stop him, he grabbed the songbook again, flipping through it like he was planning a set list. I considered faking a bathroom emergency, but before I could escape, he stood up abruptly. "Actually, you know what?" he said. "I'm going again. One song isn't enough to show the full range of my talent." "Wait, But he was already back on stage. The music started, and to my absolute horror, it was My Heart Will Go On. Again. The crowd groaned audibly this time. Someone shouted, "Are you serious?" Josh ignored them, launching into the song with even more gusto than before. He added new moves, clutching the microphone stand like it was a lover, spinning dramatically, even pretending to wipe away a single tear. "My heart will go on," he bellowed, his voice cracking on the high notes. I buried my face in my hands. By the second chorus, the audience had turned on him completely. The boos were louder now, and someone threw a napkin at the stage. Josh still didn't care. He was too busy playing air violin during the instrumental break. "Chloe," he shouted mid-song, pointing at me. "Clap for me." I froze. "What? Clap? They'll clap if you clap." I gave the smallest, most half-hearted clap I could manage. No one joined in. Josh shot me a wounded look, like I'd betrayed him, before soldiering on with the final verse. When it was over, the bartender leaned into the microphone at the counter. "Okay, folks, let's give someone else a turn," she said, her voice dripping with passive aggression. Josh came back to the table, looking slightly deflated but still smiling. "Tough crowd," he said, shaking his head. "They just don't get it." "Yeah," I said weakly. "Maybe." "So," he said, leaning toward me. "Your turn." I stood up quickly. "Actually, I just remembered. I have an early meeting tomorrow. I should probably get going." He looked disappointed but nodded. "Rain check then?" "Yeah," he leaked. "For sure." As I walked out of the bar, the sound of Josh's voice followed me. "CHLOE." I shuddered. Never again. When Ethan suggested dinner at a trendy wing place for our first date, I thought, sure, why not? It seemed casual, low pressure, and impossible to mess up. Boy, was I wrong. The restaurant, Wing Inferno, was a neon-lit temple of chicken worship. The walls were plastered with pictures of sweating, red-faced customers holding up "I survived the Inferno challenge" signs, and the air smelled like hot grease and regret. There was even a massive leaderboard near the counter, where people's names were immortalized alongside the number of ghost pepper wings they'd managed to choke down before inevitably crying into a glass of milk. Ethan seemed way too excited about the place. "This is the best wing spot in the city," he said as we walked in. He gestured to the leaderboard proudly. One day, my name's going up there. I forced a polite laugh. Wow, that's the goal. It's not just a goal, he said, looking at me with unsettling intensity. It's the goal. That probably should have been my first red flag. We got seated at a table in the back, under a giant mural of a cartoon chili pepper breathing fire. Ethan was practically bouncing in his chair as he flipped through the menu. Okay, he said, grinning. I know we're supposed to still be getting to know each other, but I have to ask, how do you feel about spicy food? I like it, I said cautiously, sensing a trap. Like really like it? He pressed, leaning forward. Or are you one of those mild salsa people? I can handle heat, I said, trying not to sound defensive. I wasn't about to let this guy judge me over my spice tolerance. He clapped his hands together. Perfect. Let's do the hot sauce challenge. I blinked. The hot sauce challenge? Yes. He pointed to a section of the menu that listed wings coated in increasingly dangerous sauces, culminating in something called the Reaper's Revenge. The description came with multiple warnings, a tiny skull icon, and the words, "Not responsible for tears or regret," in all caps. Oh, I don't know if that's... Come on, he interrupted. It'll be fun. A little friendly competition. Let's see who can handle the heat. I hesitated. On one hand, this sounded like a terrible idea. On the other hand, I didn't want to look like a coward on a first date. Okay, I said, against my better judgment. Sure. Ethan beamed. You're gonna love this. That made one of us. The waitress came by, and Ethan immediately ordered a plate of the hottest wings on the menu. And can we get a glass of milk? He added. Just one. For her. He smirked at me like he'd already won. I bit back the urge to roll my eyes. When the wings arrived, the smell alone made my throat tighten. They were bright red, practically glowing, and glistened with a menacing sheen of sauce. I could feel the heat radiating off the plate. This wasn't food. This was a threat. Ethan rubbed his hands together like a cartoon villain. All right, here's how it works, he said. We each eat one wing at a time. No water, no milk, no wiping your face. First one to cave loses. Got it? Got it, I said, though I was already regretting everything. He grabbed the first wing and took a big, confident bite. He said through a mouthful, his voice slightly higher pitched than before. Not bad. I picked up my own wing, trying not to let my hands tremble. The sauce clung to my fingers like molten lava. I took a cautious bite, and for a brief moment, it wasn't so bad. Then the heat hit. It was like someone had lit my tongue on fire and then punched me in the throat for good measure. My eyes watered instantly. My nose started running. My entire face felt like it was melting, but I couldn't give Ethan the satisfaction of seeing me sweat. Good, right? He said, his eyes watering slightly. Delicious, I croaked, my voice barely audible. We went wing for wing, each bite worse than the last. By the third wing, Ethan was visibly struggling. Sweat dripped down his forehead, and his face was turning a shade of red that matched the sauce. You doing okay? He asked, his voice shaky. Totally fine. I lied, even though I wasn't sure I could still feel my tongue. By the fifth wing, Ethan started hiccuping uncontrollably. It's just a body reaction, he said between hiccups. Doesn't mean I can't handle it. Of course not, I said, my nose running like a faucet. I casually wiped it with a napkin, pretending I wasn't on the verge of tears. By the seventh wing, Ethan's confidence was completely gone. He was sweating profusely, his face glistening like he'd just run a marathon in the desert. This is nothing, he said weakly, though his voice cracked on the word nothing. Then he made the mistake of licking his lips. Oh God, he yelped, grabbing at his face. IT spread. It's worse. I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. You okay there, champ? He glared at me, his eyes bloodshot and watery. I'm fine, he snapped, though his hand trembled as he reached for the next wing. He didn't make it. Halfway through his eighth wing, Ethan broke. He dropped the wing, grabbed the glass of milk, and chugged it like his life depended on it. Oh, thank God, he gasped, slamming the empty glass down on the table. That was, he hiccuped violently. Intense. I raised an eyebrow. Guess I win. Win. He laughed nervously, wiping sweat off his forehead. Oh no. This wasn't about winning. It was about bonding. Yeah, bonding. Sure, I said, smirking. Whatever helps you sleep tonight. Ethan spent the rest of the date in recovery mode. He sniffled, hiccuped, and kept dabbing his face with a napkin, though the sweat just kept coming. The waitress came over with another glass of milk, which he accepted with zero shame. You're tough, he said, giving me a sheepish smile. I like that. Thanks, I said. You're persistent. He laughed, though it came out more like a wheeze. Maybe next time we'll do something less intense. Like ice cream. Or yoga. Or something with less fire, I suggested. Deal, he said, raising his empty glass of milk like a toast. We parted ways soon after, and as I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Worst date ever? Not quite, but next time, I'm definitely picking the restaurant. I stood at the entrance of Greenbridge Park, tugging at the sleeves of my sweater and wishing I'd just canceled. It was one of those breezy spring afternoons. People were everywhere, holding hands, tossing frisbees, laughing, and I felt like the only one standing awkwardly on the edge of it all. Greg had been very specific about this meeting spot. Find me at the south entrance by the fountain. You won't miss me. And boy, was he right. I spotted him before he even saw me. He was pacing near the bubbling fountain, wearing a khaki jacket with way too many pockets. A wide-brimmed hat perched on his head like he was Indiana Jones about to raid a tomb, and the binoculars slung around his neck. Oh, those were the cherry on top. It wasn't quite what I'd pictured when we matched on the app. Sure, his bio had mentioned birds, nature enthusiast, amateur ornithologist, part-time pigeon whisperer. Let's flock together. But I thought it was a joke. Apparently it wasn't. Chloe, Greg called out, spotting me. He waved enthusiastically, and I plastered on my best polite smile, hoping this wasn't going to be as weird as it already felt. Hi, Greg, I said as I approached him. Up close, he wasn't unattractive. Tall, decent jawline, good smile. But there was something off. His eyes darted around, scanning the ground like he was expecting it to move. I hope you're ready for an adventure, he said, rubbing his hands together like we were about to go treasure hunting. This park has an incredible pigeon population. A pigeon population? I repeated, wondering if I'd misheard. Oh yeah, he said with way too much enthusiasm. They're fascinating creatures. Did you know they can recognize themselves in mirrors? And they mate for life. I've been studying their behavior here for years. He gestured around the park like he was giving me a tour. This is their kingdom. I wanted to laugh, but his face was dead serious. Wow, that's really interesting, I said, hoping I sounded convincing. Come on, he said, beckoning me to follow him down one of the winding cobblestone paths. I'll introduce you to the flock. The flock. I hesitated for a moment, but decided to humor him. After all, it was broad daylight, the park was crowded, and worst case, I could fake an urgent phone call and bail. So I followed him. We walked for about 5 minutes before Greg suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. He held out an arm to block me, like we were in an action movie, and he'd just spotted a landmine. There, he whispered, pointing at a group of pigeons pecking at crumbs near a park bench. His voice dropped to the kind of reverence most people reserved for baby animals or sunsets. Aren't they magnificent? I stared at the birds. They were pigeons, gray, scruffy, and slightly overweight from too much bread. One of them was missing a toe. Yeah, they're something, I said. Greg crouched down slowly, his movements deliberate, like he didn't want to startle them. Hey buddies, he cooed. It's me. I blinked. You know them? Of course, he said without looking at me. They know me too. Pigeons have incredible memory. These guys? They trust me. He reached into one of the many pockets on his jacket and pulled out a handful of birdseed. Here's a pro tip, he said, glancing over his shoulder at me. They can sense fear. If you're nervous, they'll know. Oh, fantastic. Not only was I on a date with a pigeon whisperer, but now I was being told to manage my emotional state for birds. You want to try? He asked, holding out some birdseed. I took a step back. Oh, I'm good, thanks. Come on, he urged, standing and walking toward me. It's easy. Just hold out your hand and stay calm. He grabbed my wrist and dumped a pile of seed into my palm before I could protest. They'll love you. I stood there, frozen, as Greg motioned for me to follow him closer to the pigeons. Just kneel down, he said. They won't hurt you. I wanted to say something, anything, but before I could, Greg crouched again and started making these weird clicking noises with his tongue. To my horror, the pigeons actually started waddling toward us. One of them flapped its wings and hopped closer, its beady little eyes locked on my outstretched hand. Isn't this amazing? Greg whispered. He looked up at me, his face lit with childlike wonder. They're so misunderstood, you know? People think they're dirty or annoying, but they're really just survivors. Like us. I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like bait. The first pigeon reached my hand and pecked at the seed. I flinched, and the rest of the flock must have taken it as a signal because suddenly, a dozen pigeons swarmed around me. They flapped and cooed and pecked, and I was pretty sure one of them was trying to climb my leg. Greg?" I said, my voice shaking. "I think they're a little too comfortable." "Relax," he said, his voice dreamy. "You're part of the flock now." "Oh no. No. This was too much." I stood up abruptly, scattering the seed and sending the pigeons into a frenzy. They flapped around us, and I swatted at the air, trying to avoid getting smacked in the face by a rogue wing. "Chloe," Greg said, looking genuinely hurt. "You scared them." "I scared them," I snapped. "Greg, they were climbing me." He sighed, shaking his head like I'd just insulted his entire family. "You need to let go of your fear," he said solemnly. "They can feel it. That's why they didn't trust you." I stared at him, incredulous. "Greg, they're pigeons. They don't trust anyone. They eat garbage." He gasped like I'd just said something sacrilegious. "They do not eat garbage. They're resourceful." I took a deep breath, resisting the urge to scream. "Look, I think I should probably—" "Wait," he interrupted, grabbing my arm. "I didn't show you the best part yet." I froze. "The best part?" He grinned and reached into another pocket, pulling out what looked like a whistle. "This," he said, holding it up proudly, "is the pigeon call. I've been perfecting it for years." "Oh no. Oh no. Before I could stop him, Greg put the whistle to his lips and blew. The sound that came out was something between a dying kazoo and a very confused cat. People nearby turned to look, and I wanted to disappear into the ground. But Greg was unfazed. He blew the whistle again and again, each time more enthusiastic than the last. The pigeons, to my horror, responded. They started gathering, more and more of them, swooping down from trees and rooftops until it felt like we were in some kind of low-budget Hitchcock movie. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. "Greg," I said, backing away slowly. "I think I left my oven on. Or maybe my cat. Or both. I really need to go." He looked at me, confused. "But we're just getting started." "Yeah, I'm sure you are," I said, already walking away. "Good luck with your flock." As I hurried back to the park entrance, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. Greg was still there, surrounded by pigeons, whistling like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for him, maybe it was. For me, never again.